Hello, everyone, and welcome to Marvelous Movie Mondays, or as we like to call it for the next month and a half, Marvelous Mutant Mondays, if you will.
I didn't know where you were gonna go with that, Dill. I
I
like
didn't
that.
either until I started saying it. I was like, well, the words are coming out now, so I gotta.
Sometimes I start a sentence and I
Yeah,
don't know where
it's like
it's going.
the plane's in the air. Either land it or it just keeps flying. So I gotta, land it.
It's
Um,
just like a Michael Scott over here from The Office.
how are you doing, Kelsey? This is our lovely co-host, Kelsey Kilpatrick. How are you?
Oh my god, thank you. This is our lovely co-host Dylan
Oh
Randazzo.
God, please.
I'm good. I'm fine. I'm
Yeah,
honestly tired.
yeah.
I just was nannying for 3 straight
Mm,
weeks, and
mm.
kids take drain all your energy, I'll
They
be
do.
honest.
I mean,
They take
speaking of kids, we're talking about a school like no other. That is Professor X's school. Is it school for like marvelous children or
I think it's
magnificent
I think
children or gifted
I
children? I don't
I
know.
think it's gifted. I think it's
It's
the
like gifted younglings or
Xavier
something.
School for Gifted Youngsters.
Youngsters, that's right. Younglings is Star Wars. I'm mixing so many universes. Yeah, we figured for the off season of Marvel, we just came off Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We did a big bracket last week. Go check it out. It was awesome. We had a victor that I was surprised to see win, but I was very happy to see win the whole thing. So check that out. And we don't have Loki until a few more weeks, which is actually coming earlier than we expected, as we found out this week, which we'll get into in a little bit. But we figured, what do we do in the meantime? And we've been talking so much about the MCU, and we're gonna be talking so much about the MCU, even more in a few minutes because we have Marvel news. But we were like, what are we gonna do in the off season? We thought, why don't we do X-Men because it's Marvel. And it's something that Kelsey just got into with WandaVision with Quicksilver. She just started watching them, and I haven't seen all of them, so I figured, why don't
Mhm.
I start watching them, and then we can just talk about them. It's going to be a little less formal than normal, where we kind of like break episodes scene by scene. These aren't episodes; these are big movies. We haven't talked about movies yet on this actual podcast, so we're just going to kind of give our
Oh, yeah,
overall
that's
thoughts.
true.
Yeah, we've never really dissected it,
I
so
just realized that.
we're just going to give our thoughts. We went trilogy by trilogy, or at the end we'll go two by two. But we're just gonna break down the movies, talk about our thoughts of them, some parts that stuck out to us, some characters that stuck out to us, because this is a very character heavy series, and we have some other special things along the way. But first, before we get into X Men in May, or as Kelsey likes to call it, X May, why don't we talk about the news of the week? We got a lot of Marvel news, and I think I'll start because I think I want to end on a happier note. And there was some
Okay.
sad news in the Marvel universe. We did lose a fellow Marvel, a part of the Marvel family, and that is Jimmy Rich. And Jimmy Rich is someone that no one saw on screen, but Jimmy Rich was Robert Downey Jr.'s personal assistant since 2003. He has been his
Oh.
right hand man, and Robert Downey Jr. even referred to him more as a best friend than an assistant. It was basically like a paid best friend. And he wrote in an Instagram post with Jimmy's picture. Jimmy unfortunately died of a fatal car accident at approximately 8 p.m. yesterday. That was when he posted it. Um, Robert Downey Jr. said he was a brother, my right hand man, an uncle to our kids, and beloved by all who experienced his singular character and wit. Our thoughts go out to his relatives, family, coworkers, and all the fans who knew him as a man who supported every step of my recovery, life, and career. Because as we know, Robert Downey Jr. had a very long history of addiction and his recovery, and then getting back into movies, and then becoming probably the most famous movie star of the last decade. From Marvel and all that. And then Chris
Mhm.
Evans also posted a beautiful post about it.
Yeah.
Mark Ruffalo had a great tribute in the comment section for Robert's post, and then Marvel Studios themselves posted a beautiful picture. Rest in peace, Jimmy. You have been such a great friend to all of us in Marvel Studios for many years. Your love and light were an inspiration to everyone that knew you. We will miss you. And I think it's important to note that it's not just the people on the screen. It's not even the people behind the scenes making all the magic happen, but it's the people who are there as support for these actors, because it takes a lot to be a part of a
Mhm.
franchise for so many years. 2008 to 2019,
Mhm.
Robert Downey Jr. was doing it all, and he needed that help. And we heard a lot of stories about how Chadwick's personal assistant would was one of the only people who knew that he was sick, and she or he would give him massages in between takes because they knew that he was hurting and he was sick, but
Mm.
Chadwick didn't let anyone know, and that was Chadwick's own personal kind of conscience and like right hand person throughout that whole
Mm.
journey. And I think Robert Downey Jr., like you said, with his addiction, it probably took a lot of stress and toll on him and all the actors. So to
Mhm.
have someone kind of being the person who has your back, who's not necessarily experiencing it with you like the other actors, and can just kind of be that person for you, I think it's important for everyone in every field to have that person, whether it's a therapist or again like an assistant, if you can afford one, if you're lucky enough to have a good one like Jimmy. Rest in peace, Jimmy. Our hearts go out to you. And thinking of you, Robert Downey Jr. and all the Marvel family, because obviously this is a team thing. This is a team building
Mhm.
thing, and he is on set every second Robert's on set. So he was just as much on set as Downey Jr. himself, maybe if not more. So our hearts go out to him. We lost someone in the Marvel family. It's been a tough year. Him, Chadwick. A few years ago, we lost Stan Lee. It's never easy
Mhm.
talking about this stuff. But Kelsey, I know you have other news that is probably more relevant to the future of Marvel and what's
Mhm.
to come. So why don't you tell us about that?
Well, basically, we just got a big old hefty announcement from Marvel.
Yep.
They basically gave us a lineup of, let me count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 future projects. The ones that we know of, we know Black Widow's coming July 9th. We know Shang-Chi and the seven, whoa,
10.
10 rings.
It's one of
Forgot
those days.
forgot about 3, sorry. Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, coming out September 3rd, 2021, and now we have a date confirmed for the Eternals. I don't know if this date was confirmed before this trailer,
It
but
might have been, but it's been, I mean, all these dates have been shifting around. We haven't
it
gotten a
was news
solidified.
to me.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like we had a date, but it was always that like it's subject to change, and now this
Yeah,
was them saying no, it's staying in November.
right.
And we get our
So,
first look at the actual trailer too, like the
yeah, we
actual
did.
movie.
Got some shots of, Angelina Jolie for, like, the
Hmm.
first time.
Yeah, Kumail.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's coming November 5th. Spider-Man, No Way Home, December 17th. And then we jumped right into all the movies that are coming out in 2022, which are Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, March 25th. Thor: Love and Thunder, May 6th. We got a title confirmation for the second Black Panther installment, which is
Yeah,
Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. And my heart, I don't know if you heard it from your house still, but it did snap in two
yeah.
upon
No, I
reading the
felt the ground
title.
shake. Yeah, the ground just
Yeah,
shook. Yeah,
I
yeah,
just, I feel like everyone collectively went, "Oh,"
yeah.
like it's just
I gotta say, I'm surprised that it's such a quick turnover because I know last year it was like, yeah, we're gonna have to rewrite the script, and I really want to give time to really figure out what we're gonna do with the story going forward. That was what Ryan Coogler said,
Mhm.
because obviously you have to rewrite the script now for
Yeah.
obvious reasons, but then also he said it's emotionally I need emotional time before I can
Yeah.
even rewrite. So the fact that it's happening in 2022 in almost a year from now is a little crazy. I mean, it's pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's gonna be summer season in just a few weeks here. Summer movie season, and it's gonna be summer movie season next year. We're getting another Black Panther movie, and I'm sure it'll be something to talk about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's literally gonna be nearly 1 year exactly after Black Widow, this
Yeah,
summer, so that's crazy. Also coming up in 2022, the last one for 2022 is The Marvels, the second Captain Marvel movie coming out. I know, Dill, you, expressed your disappointment to me over that title.
it's just a weird. It's one of those things where like Marvel Studios presents the Marvels. It's like Captain
Mm,
Marvel was a little on the nose, but like it's the name of the character.
mhm.
Also, the Marvels, I believe, is the name of the group in Shazam for DC. So like it's another thing where it's like kind of some people were
Oh,
like, wait, like I thought this was like an announcement for Shazam, but then they're like, wait, no, it's DC. I have to fact check that because I'm not 100% sure. I
yeah.
will in just a sec, but like it was one of those weird things where I was like, like I feel like they could have come up with something a little more creative,
Mm,
just the Marvels. And also, the whole big thing was like, a lot of people had criticisms against Captain Marvel herself. So,
mhm.
like, to make it not necessarily about her, but like about the Marvels, it almost felt like, yeah, it's not about Captain Marvel. It's about all the Marvels, like trying to almost like correct and like please all the fans who weren't a fan of Captain Marvel or whatever.
Sure.
I don't love it. I mean, I think there could have been an interesting name. I couldn't have come up with a better one like on the top of my mind, but I think eventually I would have been able to.
I
I don't know.
mean,
What are your thoughts?
my issue with this title is because I feel like it almost reveals, like, a very, intense plot point that's going to happen in the film. I mean, I don't know if you know this still, but Captain Marvel is directly tied to Miss Marvel, the
Mm,
series that we're getting out about Miss Marvel slash her name is Kamala Khan, and they are directly related. So I feel like this title just completely gave away that like Miss Marvel and Captain Marvel are going to team up in some sort of way, which I
right,
would prefer that to be a surprise. I know if you're an avid comic book reader that none of these storylines are really that big of a surprise because you've read about them.
right.
But for me, who hasn't read any of the comic books, I like these moments of like, whoa, like that's so cool, you know?
Yeah. Mm. A lot
So
of team up movies in general too. It's just like because
yeah,
Doctor Strange, we're getting a team up with Wanda, and
right.
Thor: Love and Thunder, we're gonna get Jane Foster back, but we're also getting some. I, actually, I don't know about Thor: Love and Thunder. That might not be a team up movie, but like we're getting
With, like,
more
the
team.
Guardians, you're saying? With Thor: Love and
Yes,
Thunder?
exactly, and Spider Man is gonna presumably be team up movie. We don't know. Another bit of news: Andrew Garfield kind of had an interview and was like, "That's not happening,"
Yeah.
and it's like, well, okay. Um,
So you
but a
don't
lot of team
necessarily
ups.
believe him?
Well, I don't know whether I believe him or not, but I feel like it's one of those tricky situations where if he says yes, then everyone's like, "What the fuck, dude? You spoiled it." But then if he says no and it happens, they're gonna be like, "What the fuck? You lied to us." So I feel like there's no winning with him, and I
Yeah,
just feel bad for him that he was put in that scenario. I did
sure.
look it up. Yeah, the Shazam family is also known as the Marvel family in DC, and it's a group of superheroes. Um, yeah, Mary Marvel and Captain Marvel is considered like there's a Captain Marvel in DC as well, and the whole family is called the Marvel family.
Mm,
So to call it the Marvels, I think there was also some confusion there with people. It'll probably be great.
interesting.
But yeah,
Well, that's coming November 11th, officially, and then
hmm
we got 2 movies coming up in 2023, very long feels like a long time away.
yeah,
Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And then
yeah,
also right at the end, we got a little shot of what looks like the Fantastic Four logo.
it does.
So
I've heard some people say, "What if it's a red herring and this is the Captain America 4 logo?" Because that was confirmed. I don't think it is. I think
I
it's
don't think it is. I
no.
think it's very obviously the Fantastic Four
I
logo.
think it's people wanting to be contrarians and be like, "No, like it's not gonna be Fantastic Four. Just you wait. You're gonna get your hopes disappointed."
Just like
Yeah,
Evan Peters was Ralph Boner and
right.
not
Lots,
Quicksilver.
lots of Marvel news this week for that. What is a project you're most excited for or most intrigued by? I mean, I know some of these are already announced. Most of them are already announced, but like in terms of now we have all the titles, all the release dates. What is the movie I think that you think is gonna be the one that you're most excited for?
Ooh, most excited for? I mean, like,
Yeah.
me personally, like, I've been, itching for Guardians Volume 3, and the fact that I
Mhm.
have to wait until 2023, I'm, like, counting down the days. But honestly, like, I'm still, like, so excited to be getting a Black Widow movie.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's out of this list, like, I really think, like, that's the thing that I'm most excited for, you
And
know?
it's gonna bring you back to Marvel in the theaters too, assuming we go
Right.
to the theaters. I mean, some people may watch it on Disney Plus, but we will be going to the
Oh,
theaters.
Dylan, we're going.
Oh yeah, I know we're going. I'm speaking in terms of everyone listening. Like, you might not be going to the theaters, but for a lot of people, it's going to be their introduction back to the cinema for
Right.
Marvel. I've been back to the movies for other things, but this is going to be the first event film in a movie theater after maybe Quiet Place Part Two. But even then, something about an event, a movie feels like you want to kind of almost applaud at times. You want to go, "Wow!"
Yeah.
to the point where everyone's all in agreement and everyone's kind of feeling it with you and has that energy. Whereas A Quiet Place Part Two, it's a blockbuster, but it's also like you can't make a peep in the theater because it's so silent. Like it's
Mm.
not your normal, as Martin Scorsese would say, theme park movie. And that's the thing. It's a theme like these are event movies. And so this will be a really fun way to inaugurate that. My most excited, coming off of WandaVision, I cannot wait for Doctor Strange 2.
Mm.
Also with Sam Raimi as the director,
Mm.
being a fan of the Spider-Man movies, the Toby Spider-Man movies, like I cannot wait. Um, to see some horror in this universe because I'm a horror fan too. I wasn't, and now I am. And now
Mm.
that I am, I can't stop. So
Character development, I love it,
yeah,
Dill.
Dylan used to be a scaredy cat, and now he's a scaredy cat who loves
Yeah,
it.
an
so,
adrenaline junkie.
um, So those are our favorites, and of course, Spider-Man. We both are excited for that, but also skeptical for the reasons other people are excited. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what they're gonna do, but again, it's one of those things where I don't want to get my hopes up in case it's not true. But even if it is true, am I gonna still feel like it's like if it's more, I'm debating whether or not I'm gonna be excited because it's happening or like disappointed because it's not just Tom's thing. I don't know.
Mm.
I'm still a little skeptical about that, but
I
I'm
mean,
excited.
you know where I stand when it
I know where
comes
you stand.
to
Yeah,
Spider-Man, but
yeah. You're a Tom Holland purist, and we love it. We love you for it. All right. So now let's forget about MCU. We're done with MCU for now.
yeah.
We will probably have MCU news next week because that's really where all the news is coming from. But let's talk about the year 2000, and let's go all the way back in time to a point where there was no MCU. There was not even a Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. All
Mm.
that existed was a Superman, a few Supermans, but some of them aren't good. A few Batmans, an old Captain America movie, and a Howard the Duck. We're talking about X-Men. And let's pull up the first graphic. This is the first X-Men is what we're going to be talking about first.
Mm.
Um, give us your thoughts, Kelsey, overall. Or you do have plot summaries too, if you want to share that as
I
well.
do. I do have a synopsis. So I did write down this is X-Men. It came out in the year 2000, directed by Bryan Singer. I know you told me to look into this, gentleman, but I did not because
All
I
right.
was afraid.
Yeah, you should be. It's one of those
Oh God.
case scenarios where the director now is not gonna get much work in the future for reasons that we don't. The thing is, we don't want to bring those reasons into here because this is not gonna be like a let's trash on Bryan Singer and Brett Ratner party. It's gonna be one of those things where what they did, we do not, we do not accept it. We do not validate it. We do not support it. But we're going to be talking about the movies and the actors and everyone else in the movie that helped make the movie special, not the people involved in it who are crummy people now. So you can look into it later, but we're not going to be saying praises for Singer and Ratner specifically. We're going to talk about the actual work itself rather than them. Just a little
Yikes.
disclaimer. Yeah.
So, my synopsis for X-Men is as humans decide how to regulate mutants, two sides form led by Professor X and Magneto, one wanting to coexist with the human species and one wanting to destroy them.
Yeah, that's a good one. Like that basically sums up X-Men because it's
Yeah.
very exposition heavy. It's very like this is
Mhm.
what our world is. This is the kind of the two sides, and this is what's going to carry through the future. And I think that works for it in the year 2000, but it works against it now when looking at the grand retrospective of all these movies that have come out, all the origin stories, especially Spider-Man and Iron Man and all these firsts of these franchises coming out.
Mhm.
What are your overall thoughts on the movie?
Well, I honestly enjoyed these 3 movies way more than I thought I was going to because I watched them all. I was told to watch them once, Evan Peters was involved in WandaVision. I was told by many people, "Okay, now you have to watch all the X-Men movies." And I watched them in the weird, like, chronological order that people were telling me to watch them, and honestly, like, I was confused the whole time.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're going to just jump into the X-Men universe, I feel like you should watch them in release order almost. I don't know if that's really crummy advice, but
No, I think that's
basically
the right way to do it
with these
because yeah,
movies, I kind of went in being like, okay, I'm an X-Man fan, an X-Man fan, an X-Men
man
fan
fan, X-Men.
who like read the comic books and I'm just seeing these characters like be put on screen like all together. I was like trying to put myself in like that headspace to be like, oh my God, like Professor X and like the school and like watching all these characters like be like intertwined. And like I was honestly like I enjoyed the trilogy for what it was. I didn't necessarily get the excitement of like it being a franchise. Do you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah,
feel like this trilogy could have just existed and then not another X-Men movie could have been made, and I feel like fans would have been satisfied because the only characters that you really wanna do, like, deep dives into are, like, Logan, maybe, Magneto's and Professor X's, like, prequel, like, their storyline, how they started as friends and then fell out and are now almost arch enemies in a way kind of thing. Like, you really only but all these other characters, like, I don't feel like these side characters like Storm, Jean, and Scott, and like Rogue, like, you don't really like, you don't get enough of them to like care enough about them to like,
Mhm.
if Storm got her own movie, like, what would that even look like? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, and there's a little bit of history there. They did after this trilogy, they were like, "All right, let's go now and show you some of the origins." And they were gonna do an origin series per character. They were gonna
Okay.
start with X-Men Origins Wolverine, which they did, but then because it was so critically panned, they said, "You know what? Let's not do it per character, and let's just do a revamp of when they are all teaming up together." And that's where we get
Mm,
X-Men First Class. So I think
yeah,
it was one of those things where I don't think they ever intended on doing like a whole franchise, like connecting all of it. I think it was just like,
right.
let's do the trilogy and then we'll kind of like each X-Men will get their own like little spin-off backstory. But then the first one didn't go so well, so they then just decided, no, never mind. And I think that, you know, I think watching the other stuff, the prequels, and then like the origin Wolverine, and even like the Deadpool movies, it helps richen, I guess, the whole universe as a whole. It fills in some of the
Mhm.
gaps, but yeah, I don't think you necessarily need that backstory to understand that there is a history there with Professor X, with Magneto. You know that Storm and Scott and Jean have been there for a while, and like Wolverine's now coming, Logan's coming into this world with them, and there's a little bit of tension there between Scott and Logan. It's like these are all things that I think they convey well enough in the first one that you don't need the backstory for, but the backstory only
Mhm.
helps. And we'll get into that next week when we talk about the backstory. We don't want to get into that too much now, but
Mhm.
I do think it helps. But at the same time, I think the way you said about starting with that backstory, it's not as impactful as it is watching this and then being like, well, here's how we got here. It's almost like Star Wars. It's like a lot of
Yeah.
people like to watch it in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 order, but the way it was released was 4, 5, 6. When you have this trilogy, then now we make prequels, and then you can go back and see how we got to that point. But I think it's more powerful watching it the release order because that's how everyone else experienced it too. They got this story, and then they got the extra information later. Um,
Mhm.
it's kind of why I don't start off any Marvel binge with Captain Marvel, even though it's chronologically before Iron Man, is because
Mhm.
I think there's a beauty to having lived with these characters for so long to then go back and see what was it like when Nick Fury was starting out after you've
Mm.
already seen the development of him as a character. I think if you watch it before the rest, Iron Man and all that stuff, it doesn't, the goose moment where he claws out his eye, that doesn't have as much weight. And I think it's the same thing with these movies
Sure.
as well. And this is why I like this, what we're doing, because I've never seen any of these movies except for the Deadpool movies, Logan, and somehow X-Men: The Last Stand, because it was the only one we had on DVD growing up. So I used to watch that. I hadn't even seen the first two. So the fact that I haven't seen this backstory with the Michael Fassbender, James McAvoy stuff. It's interesting because like I don't have any idea what necessarily their history was like, except for what they're giving me here. And I love that last chess scene where they're in the chess, or they're in the plastic prison, they're playing chess, because you get to see that there is a little bit of a friendship there, but it's tarnished, and there's some underlying stuff there, but there is
Mm.
that kind of almost respect where it's like we are not gonna agree, but like we're on the same page in terms of like we both know that we are kind of the heads of these two, you know, opposing forces, and
Mhm.
this is, there's a common respect to that, just being the leader, but also like we don't agree. um yeah. So what are some of your like favorite, like what are the moments that do stand out for you in this movie?
In just this one? Oh
Yeah, the
my
first one.
gosh. Let me look at my notes. Well, we meet Rogue,
Yeah.
who's on the run. This poor girl can't touch anyone. She accidentally kills her boyfriend or whoever that was in the first scene where they try
Yeah.
to tries to have her first kiss ever. Honestly, the only moment that really stands out in my head, I watched this movie a few days ago now, and it's when it's in the last like final battle scene and Storm says, "You know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing that happens to everything else." I was like, that's the most ridiculous line I think
Yeah.
that's ever been written in human history.
Yeah.
Um,
I think what's interesting along that line is like a lot of the dialogue is a little cringy and
yeah,
it's a little campy, but honestly it kind of works because this is a pre-MCU era where like we're not taking stuff as seriously as we do now, where it's like,
sure.
oh my god, like WandaVision. Like it's not, it's just like, oh, this is like fun, silly comic book shit. And honestly, there's a
Mm.
beauty in that. The first one, I do think, like you said, it's hard to find like these moments because I do think it's very surface level. It's very minimal in terms of like big action peak moments. I don't think the action is particularly interesting. I think it's more about just introducing ourselves to these characters and getting a sense of them rather than the overall, action and what they're really fighting for. Because we get more of that in X2 and X3. And I think that's kind of what works against it in a way, is it does feel a little bit not boring, but a little less important and a
Mhm.
little less rewatchable. It's just like harder to kind of get into as some of the other ones because there's really not one. I mean, the story is very basic. It's like Rogue is trying to fit in her own world and try to find a world that'll accept her for who she is,
Mhm.
because her regular life didn't. And then Magneto's trying to get Rogue to accomplish his plan, but everyone thinks he's after Wolverine. But Wolverine's also introduced to this whole group, and there's also a school. Like it's very surface
Mhm.
level. Like it's not this complex WandaVision, or this is a recent example, but like WandaVision, like all these ins and outs. It's not
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right. This franchise, I tried not to sit here and just, like, compare it to the MCU the entire time I was
Yeah.
watching it because I'm like, "You can't compare the 2, like, clearly one is superior." But this franchise does definitely feel much more like patch quilty than the MCU, where it's, like, so refined and things are so
Hmm.
done, like, so purposefully because they lead into the next thing. That being said, though, I did think that as a trilogy, it was a solid trilogy. Like each movie set up the next one like very well, and I feel like you did feel like kind of the stakes get higher with every
Hmm.
movie.
Yeah.
Um and what's interesting about Professor X and Magneto is that neither of them want like mutants to be like exterminated like off the face of the earth. It's just that they're going about it different ways.
Right.
Professor X thinks that there could be this coexistence, and Magneto is like, "No, if you're not with us, you're against us." So, like they all need to perish because we'll never be able to like thrive while
Mhm.
the
It's
humans are
almost
around.
it's almost kind of like the Carly Morgenthau Sam Wilson thing, and I know we're not comparing it, but it's
Yeah.
similar,
No, it is.
to where two people are kind of fighting for the same thing, but one's going about it in a different way. Um,
Mhm.
let's talk about some of the heroes we have. So we mentioned Rogue, and Rogue. What we decided to do was kind of find an MVM and LVM, most valuable mutant and least valuable mutant, for this whole franchise, for the whole trilogy at least that we're talking about.
Mhm.
So at the end we will do that. Kelsey approached it more in as a like, if I wanted someone on my team, this is who I'd have, and I approached it more of a like, who is most integral for the story.
Mm.
But I did give kind of like one MVP per movie, and my MVP for this movie is Rogue, because I love how she is
Mm.
kind of this catalyst into the story. I love how she's figuring stuff out as we are figuring it out, and I always love that. I love having that audience surrogate to kind of lead us into the story, because it is such a different world, and it's a school. Like there's that relatability, but it's like it's such a different thing that
Mhm.
it's interesting to have that character kind of rope us in. Also, I just love that idea of her, like, we see it a little bit with Magneto too, having a little bit of backstory, but not too much where it kind of just consumes it. It's like you get just enough to know where she's coming from and what motivates her, throughout. And I think it's honestly a really sad story for her. I think her whole arc in this whole trilogy is sad, and I think we'll get to the third one in a little bit, but I don't think they
Yeah.
necessarily pay it off so well. But I do think
Mm.
her journey in the first two movies specifically is really really powerful, just because she wants to just love, but she can't because,
Mhm.
there's that element of physical. And I know it's like, it's not about the physical, but when you do strip away the physical, you realize that just that, like, a simple hug you can't
Mhm.
accomplish. And it's
Mhm.
not, it's all about what's in here, but at the same time, maybe it's not. There is more, and she can't experience that. So I love Rogue, and I love Anna Paquin's performance. What are your thoughts on Rogue in this
Yeah.
movie?
I mean, my favorite thing about Rogue is honestly her relationship with Logan. Like, they're
Mm-hmm.
just such a dynamic duo, like this father-daughter kind of esque relationship
Mm-hmm.
happening. And it made me think about Logan, which I have already seen, and
I've seen that too. Yeah.
it just amplifies what he can do for a young girl like 10
Yeah.
times in Logan. We just get a taste of that side of him in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, Dale. I like how it wasn't just a movie that was like, here we are at a school. Oh God, mutants are fighting. Blah blah blah. We were kind of introduced. She was like a good catalyst to introduce us into
Mm-hmm.
the world of like um these X-Men and
Yeah.
everything. But I also feel like at the same time, a lot goes on in these movies, and I can't tell if I love that about these movies or if I'm, like, overwhelmed and I hate it. I
I
don't know.
I think one of the issues is that it's about a lot of characters. And
Mm.
so are the Marvel movies, but we have Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and Incredible Hulk to set up our big four, and then we do the team up. And then
Yeah.
the only people you have to reacquaint yourselves with or acquaint yourselves with is Black Widow to an extent, because we did get a little bit of her in Iron Man 2, but like
Mhm.
really introducing Black Widow and Hawkeye. The rest
Mhm.
have we've gotten the introduction. So this is why it's a little difficult, which is where the prequels do help, is that we're thrust into this world, and it's like, who's a teacher, who's a student, who's in charge, what's going on with all this, what is every person's power. And I think the third one, especially, we'll get to, suffers from that the most in just introducing so many characters, where it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
and this brings me to some of the other characters like Storm. I don't think Storm, aside from that one moment at the end, I don't think she gets a lot to do in this. And
Yeah.
I
No, yeah,
remember
I
as a
agree.
kid being like, yeah, Storm, I knew who she was, but like watching it, I'm like, she really doesn't have a ton to do. And Wolverine, Logan himself. Let's talk about Logan. I mean, he is the star, I think, of this movie
Yeah,
in terms
for
of just
sure.
like overall charisma, performance, and memorability. Like they really knew, I think, when they got Hugh Jackman, who was
Yeah.
relatively unknown at the time. Um, they knew they were doing a good casting decision. They knew they were banking on him for a lot of their juicier moments in the franchise. I love the character. I don't know about you, but
No, I love him. I'm like,
yeah,
I'm obsessed because I'm
yeah,
like, he's like really the only character that they set up to have solo movies. And he gets 2 movies that are like, he gets X-Men Origins, Wolverine, The Wolverine, and Logan. Like, there's a reason why that happened the way it did. And
right.
um I had another thing to say. Oh, yes, like you were saying with the team up, I was also trying to imagine it if, like, The Avengers was the first movie to come out in, like, the MCU, and I'm like, that would just feel, like, so overwhelming, I think, which is why I can't tell if I love or hate the fact that, like, there's all these different, like, layers that you kinda, like, have to peel back, but you don't get too much
Mm.
information about them once they're peeled back. I don't know if that helps
Yeah,
or if
which I think
it's
is why I
yeah.
was more drawn to Logan and Rogue, because we do
Yeah.
get that moment before where he's in the boxing match and he,
Mhm.
beats the shit out of that guy, and it's like, yes. And then she's there also, and she's got this mysteriousness about her, and we get their characters are so well rounded and so developed in that one movie, where the rest of them just don't feel that. And we get a little bit with Jean and Scott also, like, they've got a relationship, but then
Mhm.
Logan's also in there. And I think they rushed that a little bit too, because by the
Yeah.
end of the trilogy, we're supposed to really root for Jean and Logan, but at the same time,
Yeah.
and we'll get into Scott in a little bit, because there's some things I don't love about what they did with his character.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting, because it's like they set up all these little things, but they don't really follow through with any of it to the extent that Rogue and Wolverine have their
Mhm.
stories followed through with. So it's interesting. Even
For
Magneto
sure.
and Professor X, I don't think we get a ton of them until the future movies. Um, you know,
No,
yeah.
yeah. But
So
I thought that it was a solid, like, introduction to
yeah,
this universe, you know?
hmm, yeah,
I rated all mine.
yeah.
I gave X-Men a 6 out of 10.
I gave it a exact same score as you did. So I gave it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because I think it's a really good introduction, but again, like it just feels so minimal compared to the future of the series, and I just don't think all the characters are given enough to evenly disperse. And I get that. Like most team up movies, you're gonna have characters who have more of an arc than others, but
Yeah.
it's like when you're introducing all of them, it's tough.
Yeah.
So let's move on now to the next one, which is X2. And this is
X2.
one that has been very highly regarded amongst a lot of people, a lot of our peers, a lot of critics, all that.
Mhm.
So I want to get your thoughts first. You can give your synopsis and just your overall thoughts on X2.
X2 came out in 2003, directed Bryan
I hate
Singer
that.
once again.
I hate it's called X2 and it came out in 2003.
No.
They couldn't have just released it like December of 2002. Anyway,
Yeah.
keep going.
I don't even get why it's called X2, to be completely honest with you.
Well, again, I think it had a working title of like X2 X-Men United, but like on the posters now it's just X2, and on
Oh,
Disney
is that the
Plus it's
full
just X2.
title?
It was marketed some places as X2, X-Men United. Internationally, it was marketed as X-Men 2, and then it just became X2. I don't know the history on that. It's weird. It's very weird.
Yeah, this franchise almost feels like a little bit neglected in a way when it comes to, like, details like that.
Yeah,
I
it's
feel
yeah.
like they were just kinda like, it'll be fine," and now we're all just like that's another thing that I don't like about, the franchise as a whole, is that the continuity just sucks. So
Yep.
you don't even have to watch it. Again, don't watch them in, like, chronological order. Just go do release order because
Mhm.
like, you're gonna be sitting there thinking like, "Wait, what?" And then
Yeah.
also, like, Days of Future or not Days of Future Past. No, Days of Future Past completely changes the timeline of, like, a bunch of shit. So,
Yeah.
like,
And
just
we'll get there in a little bit, next week with Days of Future Past, but then also when we talk about X-Men 3 a little bit. But let's talk about
no.
X2.
Yeah, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself.
No, it's fine. It's just it's a good thing for me to remember to save for later because I have something to say about that point, that exact point.
So this is my synopsis for X2. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, I'm just, like, reading my notes over.
Oh, that happened. Yeah, yeah.
It's been a minute since I've, watched this movie.
Mhm.
The government considers making mutants register while a man named Stryker informs them of the Xavier School. The X-Men do everything they can to protect the children, and Jean pays the ultimate price.
Yeah, that's a good summary. And I think
Yeah.
the thing about X2 that I like a lot is that it immediately throws you into the action. Whereas the first one, it was very like, let's establish the world, and there's a little action at the end. It's like, no, we're getting this
Mhm.
Nightcrawler scene, and I love that scene where he's jumping around the
Oh,
White House.
love Kurt Wagner. Love him.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the real name. That's the thing. You're good with names. You're always good with names. I never know.
Well,
He's Alan
yep.
Cumming to me because that's the actor. I'll go by his
Yep,
name,
yep,
but
yep, yep, yep.
you go by Kurt Wagner. Yeah, no, he is great, and I love the not shape shifting, but like the
Teleportation.
teleportation. Yeah, like where he's just like hopping around the White House, and my
Yeah.
mom even asked because I watched this with my mom the other night, and she was just like, do you think they actually filmed at the White House? I'm like, considering he's jumping on all the walls and knocking doors down, probably not. But
Becky,
that's,
she's so funny.
uh,
Yeah, what'd you think of this one, Dill? You liked jumping right into the action?
I do like it a lot. I think it really does kind of. I think the best thing about the X Men movies is the parallels it makes to real world issues
Mm.
because it's a lot about that idea of families not accepting who you are and this essentially idea of
Yeah.
coming out,
Yeah, that's
having to talk to
ex
your family. Yeah.
yeah.
And I think
The like,
one of
I'm sorry, the moment the mom
no,
says that entire scene with Bobby, I'm like, he's literally coming out to his parents right now, and his mom at one point, mom goes, "Have you ever just tried not to be a mutant?"
right.
I'm like,
And
"Oh
it's
my
one of those
god."
things where it's like, yeah, it seems a little silly, but it's like, no, this is like they're actually discussing what it is to like come out, maybe not necessarily like sexuality wise, but like even if like gender, even or even race, where it's like you're not you bring someone home and it's like, oh, you're not accepted here.
Right.
It's a really interesting idea, and parallel, and I think we get it a lot in this one because we do see a lot more of the real world stuff. And again, I love what they do with Rogue's character. It's Rogue and Bobby have one of the most awesome arcs in this because like
Mm.
you see her now, she has love with another
Mhm.
mutant, but she still can't touch him, but he is still accepting of that, and they try
Yeah.
to make it work. And when they get that kiss, you're like, yes, and then it's like, no, like
Yeah.
it's this ebb and flow. And when they has to talk to the parents, and it's the brother who like basically calls the cops, like that whole scene where they're at the house is just so good. And I think it really is the strongest stuff that this series does, is that real world parallel of like, what is it like to be different and have others perceive you differently, and how do we work on making it more acceptable to be different. And I love that about X-Men, and I think that's what this movie does really well.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think it has some of the same issues earlier. I don't think the action is necessarily as, you know, intriguing, aside from that opening Nightcrawler scene. Again,
Mhm.
so many characters. But the good news is we've already established enough characters in the last movie, like Rogue and Logan, where now we can like dive deeper into um like Mystique, and dive deeper into like Magneto and Professor X a little bit more, and dive deeper into these new characters, and even the characters who were young like Iceman and Pyro, who are now older and now kind of part of the crew. um
Mhm.
so I think it did a little bit better of a job. What do you think of this movie and the characters?
I like this one a lot. This is
Hmm.
one where, like, like I've been saying, I can't tell if I love that there's a lot going on or if I'm just like overwhelmed by it. But I feel
Mhm.
like, we're dealing with the government versus mutants again. Like that's always going to be the underlining problem, conflict in all these movies. But now we have this random man come in and just be like, no, these people are more a problem than you think. Like my son is like one of them. So we he can access, and he's like trying to go after like Cerebro, and then he like takes the children. This one was honestly like more exciting to me because it was exciting to watch the school kind of be threatened a little bit,
Mhm.
and for like Logan to be like the designated like babysitter who had to kind of like step up and be like, oh god, like I gotta protect these kids. It's like always
Right.
entertaining to watch him like be fatherly towards
Yeah,
someone, I think.
because he's not that type. Like, when you
Yeah,
think of
not at
like
all.
Logan, Hugh Jackman, obviously, yes, but like Logan is
Yes.
not the like warm, fuzzy, cuddly teddy bear. But at the same time, it's almost more endearing that way. It's like when you see like Vin Diesel in The Pacifier and like Dwayne Johnson in the Game Plan. There's a reason why these bigger guys take on these more like softy roles. Like even
Mhm.
in the movie that came out last year, My Spy, with Dave Bautista who
Yeah,
plays
yeah, yeah,
Drax.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's something charming about these kind of like unconventional types of people taking on these other roles that are not like them or like their type. Um, yeah, that's definitely a strength for sure.
Yeah, and then we're dealing with all of this, but then also the entire time Jean is having her own conflict going on with like not being able to control her powers, or her power kind of like um being controlling her more than she's controlling it.
Hmm.
And and in the end, like, she's the one to make the sacrificial play, or what we think is the
Right.
sacrificial play.
Right. And I think it's interesting because like I think I like what you said earlier about how the trilogy works really well, but I think the thing that separates the first one from these two is that Jean story, because they're really building. Jean is one of the characters they really want to build a huge arc for, but we don't get a
Mhm.
lot in the first movie at all. We get a
Yeah.
little bit of attraction between her and Wolverine, and even in this film, we don't get a ton between her and Wolverine. But I do think I
Mhm.
like her arc in this one and the next one, just how it grows and becomes that Dark Phoenix arc. Because as someone who didn't read the comics, I still know what Dark Phoenix is, and to see that last shot of the Phoenix over the water, I'm like, oh, Phoenix arising from the ashes. She's dead, but she's really not. It
Mhm.
was nice to be like, oh, cool. So this is where they're headed in the next one. I like how they end on that, where it's not a cliffhanger like some Marvel movies where it's like, oh shoot, I have to watch the next one because this. It could have ended there still, but because you have that shot, it still keeps it open ended without being like a you have to make another one. Um,
Mhm.
and that's why I like this movie, like on its own, just as a standalone movie. It's got a good beginning, middle, and end. It's just a solid movie overall.
Yeah, yeah, I like this one a lot. And I know we're probably going to talk about him more in the next with the last movie, but Scott Summers is just like he's just so forgotten. And
Yeah,
like if you're going to write a love triangle between Scott, Jean, and Logan, at least make it a little like one of
yeah.
like he might lose her. You know what I'm saying?
And the
Like,
thing is, according to her words, she's like, "Oh, I'm choosing Scott. Like you're the bad boy, you're the temptation." But then
yeah.
we'll get to the third film. That's the least. That's the worst thing about the third film. But it's like
Yeah.
there's just there's not enough of Scott being good,
Mhm.
that like being like this, like, oh wow, like yeah, she should be with him, to
Yeah.
where we are all rooting for her and Logan, even though her and Logan don't really have an amazing relationship. We don't get a ton with them, but we
Yeah.
get more with them than we do her and Scott. And everything we get from Scott is just stay away from my girl, or like I don't like you, and he's like I don't like you either, middle finger with my claw. And it's like, yeah, but the
Yeah.
thing is, the difference is Logan and Scott both have those moments, but Logan has all this other stuff. Scott doesn't have that other stuff, and it really takes away, I think, for their characters,
'Cause, like,
or his character.
yeah, exactly. Cause like, honestly, I'm watching it, and I'm like, I'm not rooting for her to be with either of these boys. Like, I feel
Right.
like it's not really like a Katniss situation where you're, like, watching The Hunger Games and you're like, "Oh, but she has to be with Peeta. They've been through the games together. But Gale's so nice. He took care of her." Like, it wasn't like a
I've
push
never
and
been a
pull
Gale guy, but
situation.
yeah, okay.
I mean, but I've never been a Gale person either, but, like, I can understand where, like, people who, like, wanted her to end up with
Yeah,
Gale some way, somehow. It's like
I
we
think they
didn't.
still did a better job with like making it clear that Peeta was the one she should be with in that. But like
Yeah.
this one, I do agree. Like they don't really. it's gonna be Logan because everyone loves Logan, but I think
Yeah.
they're banking on the fact that everyone loves him as Logan, that like everyone will just root for him and Jean to be together. They don't need to give him and Jean a lot together. That the fans will just say, "Oh, but it's Logan, so it's obviously got to be them." You know?
Right.
Yeah.
That's just like another thing. And I'm like, it bothers me anyway that they're like trying to make this woman more interesting by like giving her two men to fight
Hmm.
over. Like, but that's just like, it's from 2003, whatever. I have to take it for what it is. But I'm like, if
Right.
you're gonna write the love triangle, at least make it entertaining, you
Right.
know? They,
And then like that
because
one
like
moment where, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, her and Scott are married. So it's like, that's the done deal right then and
Oh, I
there.
didn't know
Like,
they were even married.
I
I
think
didn't even
at
get
some
that.
I think at some point she says, like, "I'm married to him," or
Maybe she
something.
probably does. It's just again like there's so much in these movies because there's so
Yeah.
many characters, and I do agree. I think if you're gonna make the third movie all about her, you got to give her a lot more in the first two, especially in the first one. This one we get a little bit more of her, but even then, it's like her and Storm are up in a plane for a lot of it, and they're just up there, and it's like it's almost like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, we got to cycle back to them, and it's like I get there's so many other stories going on, but like they're going to get Nightcrawler, and like they're going to there's Logan with the school, and then Magneto's
Mhm.
got his own story, and I will say the highlight of this movie for me is Magneto and Mystique. I think they in this movie are
Mhm.
just so much fun to watch because
Yeah.
they're like a little duo. There's almost that moment where they're in the I guess it's a plane with them all, and he's kind of like looking at Mystique, and he's like talking about Pyro and stuff, and like whispering or
Yeah,
about
yeah,
Rogue,
yeah.
and he's like,
Yeah.
it's just like it's this funny little like buddy type thing. And I've not
Yeah.
seen the prequel, so I don't know if they're romantically involved in the earlier ones
Mm.
or if they're just like best friends, like right hand woman, like this is
Mhm.
my right hand person. But I love their little play, and I love how she can like take shape of other people. Like I think it's just such a
Mhm.
cool dynamic to the story because it keeps it engaging for the audience. Because every moment you're like, is that her? Is it not her? Is it Mystique? Is it not Mystique? And
Yeah.
he's just so good. I mean, Ian McKellen as and everything, but especially as Mysterio is just so good.
Yeah.
And I mean
Yeah.
that that prison break scene is awesome because it's like it's a plastic prison and you're like, how is he gonna get out of this? And then he does, and it's just it's so cool. And the music swells, and you have that shot of him with the it's almost like Ebony Maw in Infinity War where he's just gliding and just
Yes,
shooting
yes.
things
It's,
out of
like,
his
all
hands.
very, like, fluid, and they're just,
Yeah.
like, so, like, stoic about it, and they're
It's
just like,
almost like a
"I barely have to
maestro.
lift a finger."
It's almost
Yeah.
like a conductor conducting
Yeah,
everything. Yeah.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, the one person I think who suffers the most in this movie, if I had to pick like an LMP or LVM, least valuable mutant
LMP.
for
Uh,
this movie, it
uh-huh.
would probably be Professor X just because I feel like they almost don't know what to do with him, and then they're like, let's
Mm,
just make him the guy that's getting controlled. It's almost like he's like they're using him as a thing rather than a person, and
mm,
like it's just I just feel like he's just there to kind of sit in the chair, and they just kind of have him under their spell the whole time. He really doesn't get
mm.
a ton to do in this, and it's a shame because I think Patrick Stewart is so good, but I think this is the least amount for of him that we've seen in this trilogy, even in the
Yeah,
next one where he dies halfway through. Spoiler alert! But like it's well, we'll get there. But
yeah.
it's just interesting how he was the one who kind of got the short end of the stick, and of course Scott because he's just not there for half of it. But
Mhm.
um, yeah. Any more thoughts on X2? I feel like we've been talking about the negatives, but like there are a lot of positives.
No, 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 I like this one a lot. I
Mhm.
really did. I mean, spoiler alert, like, it's my favorite. Like, I ranked it the best out of
Yep,
these 3 movies. That being said, I gave it a 7 out of 10.
I did too. We are
Oh
we
my
are
god, that's crazy.
We were on the same page. Yeah,
We're on
because
the
I do
same
think it
page.
does have some issues that the first one did, but I think its peaks are much better. That prison break, the opening sequence,
Yeah.
you give Storm a little bit more to do. You give Jean a little bit more to do. Logan gets a little bit more to do. Rogue has that story with Iceman. Like it's got a lot more to like love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, the first one set up this one, like, very well.
And this one sets up the next one very well, and we'll talk about it now. Let's transition into the next one.
Awesome.
X-Men: The Last Stand.
Yeah.
Um, give me your overall thoughts.
Well, this one I
Yep,
just finished,
synopsis.
moments
Me too.
ago.
Me too.
Like a few hours ago. Yeah, so it came out in 2006, new director, directed by Brett Ratner. And my synopsis: after a cure for mutants is discovered, Magneto forms a team of mutants to destroy it. Meanwhile, Jean Grey comes back after the events of X2 with stronger powers, and Rogue considers taking the cure.
Yep. So there you go. I again, I'll get into your thoughts in a sec, but it is very
Yeah.
much like Dark Phoenix storyline, Cure storyline,
Yeah.
and I'm curious to see how you think about the two of them kind of coming together.
Yeah.
What are your overall thoughts?
I mean, this is what I've been saying though. It's like there's so much that goes on, and I think that in this movie, the last one, it's the messiest and it's the least like executed
100%.
well and coherently. So I have to say like this one is definitely the weaker of the 3 for me.
Hmm.
I do think that it's exciting to see Jean Grey be this Dark Phoenix character, but I feel like after like we see her like do all this like great like she's like this like very like sexually charged scene with Logan like in the school.
Hmm.
She fucking murks Scott. The first thing she does is takes out Scott, which is very unclear. Like I feel like he's just kind of like in pain,
Yeah,
and then we cut, and then the next time we see Jean, she's by herself. So I'm like, wait, Scott's dead? Like it took me a second
but
to like put
yeah,
two
the
and two
thing is, they
together.
come across her corpse or her body. She's not
Yeah.
dead, but like, there's no like, oh, let's see where Scott is, and they don't even bring it up till like maybe a half hour later where they're like, I think she killed Scott, and it's
Yeah.
like I think, and then a few scenes later, there's a grave for Scott, and it's wait, what? Like
Yeah. No, yeah.
crazy. Yeah,
Uh so like it was cool for me. I like wanted to this to be more about Jean. And I feel like after we get these great moments of her, once she's under like on Magneto's team, we don't really see much of her. She doesn't do much in the final battle until she stops all the bullets from flying, and then like 12 seconds later, Hugh Jackman's killing her to like take one for the team, you
yeah.
know?
This is the shortest of the movies, and I think it
Mhm.
shows because
Yeah.
it's so rushed. Everything's so rushed, and like, here's the thing, it's entertaining, and
Mhm.
my hot take of the day is that I'd rather rewatch this than the first one, just because
Okay.
I think this one is more rewatchable because there is just more action and just like a lot of interesting stuff. It just all
Sure.
doesn't come together as a film. If I'm judging it as a film, it's not great. But as a
Yeah.
like piece of entertainment, like I'd rather rewatch this than the first one just because I think there's just more moments in this one that I like.
Yeah.
But it's just tough because yeah, they want this Jean Grey storyline to be the forefront, but then they also have this vaccine, like let's cure them storyline. But the thing is, the
Mhm.
whole last movie was all about how like, they shouldn't mutants shouldn't exist, and like, they're a harm to society. Like this has already been a thing, and it's like this just seems like another way to kind of just say what Stryker already was trying to do. It's just another way of doing it, like another way of going about it is like let's just make it now like there's an actual medicine rather than let's kill all the mutants, let's like
Mhm.
change them. And it's like there's some parallels to like, again, what we're talking about with like coming out. There's that idea of like gay conversion therapy where it's like, people
Mm.
are trying to force people to take medicine and kind of almost pray the gay away. That's like a common phrase, and I think that this kind of dives into it a little bit. But because you have that and the Dark Phoenix storyline, I agree, when they
Mhm.
do come together, when it's Magneto and Jean, they're trying to bridge that gap, no pun intended, bridge, but they're
Yep.
trying to bridge that gap, but I don't think they do it very successfully because it's just the two storylines just don't really have much to do with each other. They try,
Yeah.
but it doesn't happen. And I will say, like, we got to talk about Scott,
Yeah.
and we also got to talk about Mystique because she is given a raw
Yeah.
deal. She's
Yep.
given a raw deal in this. She gets shot, her powers get erased, and then Magneto, who has always been about sticking up for the mutants, all about mutants, is just says, "You're no longer one of us. Goodbye." And it's like,
No, yeah. He's a dick about it.
and like it just seems so out of character. I get she's a human now, but it's like you'd think that that would be his way of maybe saying, "Oh shit." Like that could have been a much more powerful
Mm.
story element, but instead you just have him say, "All right." And the same thing just happened earlier where Jean kills Scott, and it's just everyone's like, "All right." It's like these moments don't have time to breathe.
Yeah.
Like, ah,
Like a major character from this whole trilogy died in like the first 20 minutes, and like first of all, no one realized, and second of all, when it was actually discovered and confirmed, we just had to like move past it quickly because like we had to pay attention to like what was going on next.
Mhm.
And yeah, oh my god, when Mystique when okay, so like I watched this movie, right? Like supposedly, but like I don't think I did. I must have been in a blackout the first time I watched this movie because when I watch Mystique get like transformed back into a human and then to have her just completely like stab Magneto in the back and just be like, yep, this is all his plans. This is where he's going to be. This is where he's hiding. Like, go get him. Cause they were like, they cut back to like the people who that were interrogating her and they were like, yeah, she just came in and started giving us all the information that we needed. And I was like, yes, bitch, like do you, because to watch her just like be like the one thing that I mean, you haven't seen the prequels, so and it really doesn't matter, but like to just watch her be like stripped of like the thing that made her so unique and so
Mhm.
cool and so badass. Like I was almost, it's not the team we're supposed to be rooting for, but I was almost like so like, no, not
Yeah.
Mystique. Like she doesn't deserve that.
It's almost like even if they had done what they did and stripped her of the powers, but then like a lot of the story is Magneto still has her and like is trying to find a way to get it back. Because
Mhm.
at the end when he's the last shot is him, as a normal person again, and then you see the chess piece move and it's like, oh, he's got his power back. Is that
Mm.
because Magneto has his power back? Is that everyone's getting their power back? They don't make
Mm.
that clear. I think because they want to end on like a cool little like, ooh, you know? And
Yeah. That's another
like
thing about this one is that I feel like they left us off on some cliffhangers, but I'm like, what's the next movie that came out after this one? Because it's
Origins
certainly
Wolverine.
okay. So
And it has nothing to do with
and
this.
it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with this one. So I'm like, why are they teasing us for like almost like a fourth X-Men movie
And they
that
knew they weren't
never
gonna make
came?
another one. They knew they were gonna go to the origin stuff. So they didn't even intend on making a fourth, and they never do. They never really follow through with this storyline. I don't know. I
Yeah.
haven't seen Days of Future Past, so they might, but because I know the cast members are the same in both. But
Right.
like, it's just so weird, and it's like watching it, I was like, I think I enjoyed that more than X Men, just in terms of like, it's an easier watch. Like, there's more entertainment. But like talking about it, I'm like, did I like it? Like, is it
No,
good?
yeah.
Like,
And another thing, we get introduced to two characters who we really don't get like full arcs from or anything. The kid in the beginning,
Angel,
Warren,
yeah, mhm.
Angel, like in the beginning, like this poor kid's ripping out his wings. Every time I see the shot of his back and like the
Yeah.
rawness of the wings that he was just ripping out, and I'm like, oh, this guy's ripping out his wings. Like it almost makes my back hurt a little bit. And then the whole reason why they got the vaccine to begin with is because of a mutant kid who takes away mutants' powers, and that's how they made a vaccine through like his blood or something. It's like, what's that kid's story? How'd they get that kid?
I'll also say 2 cold opens. We should have known just from the beginning when they were like Jean Grey, and it's like, ooh, cool, cold open, and then it's like, oh wait, what's this kid? Oh, no, another cold open,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
it's like, I
Yeah,
think it
yeah,
was
yeah.
basically them saying, do we want to do the Dark Phoenix thing, or do we want to do the we're gonna try to like change these mutants back into people thing, and it's
Mhm.
like, which are you gonna do? And honestly, if this was 2 hours, 2.5 hours, they might have been able to do it. But I think because the
Right.
runtime is an hour 40, you just don't have
Yeah.
the time. You just don't. They should have gone all out Jean Grey or the other way. And I think also because it's so rushed and there's so many other things to touch on, we haven't even talked about it. Professor X dies.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
supposedly, but like he basically blows up. And then you texted me today. You're like, "There's a post credit scene." I was like, "Oh, they're doing that too? Great!" And I watched it. I was like, "So he is alive?" But then they don't ever have a sequel to this. I guess the sequel to this would be Logan, but like,
Yeah.
and we know he's alive in Logan. Of course, sad spoiler alert, he later dies again in Logan. But like,
Yeah.
it's just so weird. It's like I just feel like they have such big moments, but like they don't ever let any of them breathe. It's like big moment
Yeah.
next. It's like not even like a big moment period next. It's big moment comma next. It's just it's a lot.
It's just
And
one long run-on sentence.
yeah, and again, like you said, they introduced Angel and the kid, but they introduce a lot more too. They introduced Beast. he was supposed to be this huge
Right, right,
element of
right,
the
right.
story, and they act as if he's been there all along. I know they say like, "Oh, good to see you, Beast," but it's also like it's made to make it seems like he's a much more important character, and we see by the prequels he is. Then they
Mhm.
lead on. We get a Juggernaut for the first time. We get
Mhm.
Kitty Pride slash Shadowcat for the first time. We get again Angel. We get so many people for the first time. We see multiple men played by our McSteamy Grey's
Yes!
Anatomy
I
Eric
was
Dane.
like, "Eric Dane's in here?" He has, like, 2 lines the
Yeah.
whole movie.
And then there's that whole sequence where they go to that like little abandoned theater, and there's like 40 mutants, and they're all showing off their different powers. There's the guy who's fat and then shrinks to skinny, and then there's
Mhm.
the girl who can tell how many mutants are in the world. Like there's just so many people and things they're introducing where it's like it's almost like they're like, here's all the stuff left in X-Men, and we have one movie. Throw it at the wall, see what sticks.
Yeah, yeah, just, like, a mess. I think the
Ugh.
most disappointing thing for me is the fact that Magneto literally spends the whole, like, second half of the movie trying to get his hands on Jean Grey, finally gets her, and, like, doesn't even utilize her during the final battle. She's
And then
used
even
for, like,
says like,
point
"Oh, what
0.4
did I do?"
seconds.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's so weird. And
and
again, like yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, and plus I'm watching her use her powers, and I'm like, this bitch is dusting people out of existence, and she doesn't even have a single Infinity Stone. How is she dusting these people?
Another thing, like X2 gradually kind of shows it, but I feel like it goes from 0 to 100 real quick with Jean, where it's like
Mhm.
I wish they teased it again with X-Men and even a little bit more in X2, so where when she finally becomes this Dark Phoenix, it's like this huge like it's been building to it, and I just didn't feel like it was really building to it, and then they show us this flashback scene, which again kind of fucks with the continuity because we see them as young, but also we know what they look like young, and he's walking, so he's not in a chair yet, but we see James
Yeah.
McAvoy in the chair
Yes.
eventually,
Yep.
so it's like,
Yep.
and that's just I think on the franchise itself, it's they knew they were gonna find themselves in some holes, and that's just what happens with franchises. But again,
Right.
Marvel has been planned out from the start. They have probably their future plans planned out. The only wrench in their plans was Chadwick Boseman's death, and they're still able to work around that. With
Mhm.
this, it's like I feel like it was they came up with each movie as they went, and they didn't really go back to see if it would fit in within the rest of the franchise and how it would really stack up. Because I watched that and I was like, oh, so they didn't know back then that they were going to do a younger Magneto and Professor X,
Nope.
and yeah, I don't know, the more we're
Nope.
talking about it, the more I don't like it. And I was my hot take was going to be that I would rank this above the original X-Men
Mhm.
because I do find some of it just more enjoyable. I do think, this I like seeing all the different mutants and their different powers and stuff. But then the more we're talking about it, I don't think I can. Just because I don't like what they do with Scott and Jean's story. I don't like what they do even with Logan and Jean's story. He kills her and then it's just over and like that. And
Yeah.
why is Kitty the only one at the funeral or the
Mm.
graves? Like
Yeah.
it's so there's so many weird choices, but the
That's another
action.
character. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off,
Yeah, no, it's fine.
but, like, Kitty's another character where I'm like, where like, the only, like, moments of, like, vulnerability we get with her is when she's like, "You don't get it, like, Professor X, like, came to my house, like, personally." I'm like, "Doesn't he do that with all the students? First of all, sit down."
Right.
Because
I
I
feel
feel
like they
like
were trying to make you care for Professor X's death more, but like I feel like if and Elliot Page is great, great actor, but like it's
yeah.
like there are other characters I feel like you could have given those moments to. Even Rogue, even though he didn't come to Rogue, but like like Storm. Storm I feel like gets a short end of the stick a lot too. Like give Storm that moment to and she kind of is at the graves at the end, but give
Mhm.
Storm the moment where it's like man, like I was with him from the start and he was my
Mhm.
mentor, all this stuff. Like you could have done that. I think you got I mean, I like Kitty for the sake of like Kitty has some cool action sequences, walking through the
Yeah.
walls with
Yeah.
Juggernaut. I love that where like Kitty will go through a wall and then Juggernaut will like smack through the wall. It's
Yeah.
so funny.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and that's the thing. The action is good. Like I think the action is well done. Like I love Colossus just chucking Logan. Like I love that stuff. But the
Yeah.
story elements are just rough, really
Yeah.
rough.
And what I was noticing while we were talking is like I feel like with every one of these movies, it always felt like Magneto was starting from square one.
Mhm.
When we see him in the first movie, like he always has Mystique. Mystique is always there for him, and then he kind of like collects Pyro during the second movie. But he also had like, but I guess those two characters died, which makes sense why he doesn't have them anymore. Sabretooth and Toad.
Yeah,
Did
who
they
are just
die in the first
throwaway
one?
characters. Toad did because
Toad does
Storm.
because he gets struck by lightning because of that line. But what happens to Sabretooth, I don't even remember. But I just feel like he's always like he's like, okay, like I will go out and I will collect mutants and I will get them a part of my cause. And that's where we always start with him, where I feel like I want some like he's so powerful, like I don't know. I just wish we all weren't always starting with square one with him, like where he
Mhm.
starts off in that like abandoned church where like the mutants are like having their meeting and he's like, "Oh no, they're going to force us to give this vaccine, so you might as well join me while you have the chance," you know?
Yeah. So what are you giving this score wise?
Uh I wrote down 5, but I don't even think that like I think 5 is fine.
I gave it a 6, but now like looking back, I just don't think I think I'm gonna settle for 5 as well. Just because again, there are moments I like, but there are moments I can't. And we didn't even talk about the rogue. Now there's a rogue love triangle too.
Right. Right.
What do you
And
think about
now
that?
and Bobby being so involved with Kitty is the whole reason, not like the whole reason, because at the end of the movie, you know, she does make it abundantly clear that, like, I took this vaccine like for me. Also, you were relating the vaccine to conversion therapy during our current climate today. What's going on? I'm like, I
Yeah,
couldn't help but think, oh, there's a band of people that don't want to take the vaccine and a band of people that are like, considering it. Like, what
yeah.
does that sound like?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I do think this one though is a little bit more of like they're leaning toward like you saying you should embrace your differences and not try to get rid of them. So I think it's a little
No,
this
I just
specific vaccine is more of like a you shouldn't want to get rid of your troubles, but I do see what you mean in terms of that opposing sides wanting different things and having different opinions for sure.
it just made me think of, like, just
Yeah,
everything that's going on with COVID,
100%.
even though it's
But you
vastly different.
what do you think of that love triangle? Because I think honestly, I think Iceman and Rogue they have a really good 3 movie arc. I think they really do.
Mhm.
I think the first movie, you know, you get the little glimpse of him like showing her something in class, and she's like, "Ooh."
Yeah.
Second one, you really see they've gotten together, but there's that struggle because she can't touch him, and then you know his parents aren't accepting of him, and obviously her because they're not accepting of him either. And then
Mhm.
the third one, it's like, I just can't do it anymore. It's not fair to you. You're able to hold Kitty's hand, like you this is what you want. I'm gonna leave. But I like how he did say, "Oh no, I want Rogue," and he went after her. I would have hated if they just made it like, well, now I'm gonna get with Kitty. And I like how they don't have him get with Kitty. I
Yeah.
like how he then goes after Rogue. And even though Rogue is absent for a lot of the third film, I do like how
Yeah.
at the end she's like, "This is what I wanted," and now they can finally be together. But then there's that question of, well, Magneto gets his powers back. Does that mean Rogue's gonna get hers back? It's like,
Mm.
what does this
Right.
mean? You know?
Right. What I like about her arc is that, you know, she realizes that there's something wrong with her. She goes to the school. Bobby is kind of the first person to like really accept her and to like, you know, almost welcome her into this entire lifestyle. So then she kind of spends the second movie like being able to like, oh, I can still receive and give love even as the person that I am. And then when she gets to the third movie, she's like, but that's even though I am loved by this boy. Like I want to be able to not just only touch him, but just like others, you know?
Hmm.
And I feel like she sums it up best in the scene with Logan where he's like, I hope you're not just doing this for some boy. And she's like, no, I'm doing this for me. Like
Yeah.
this, like I'm lacking in physical touch in all areas of my life, not just romantic, sexual ways, like
Hmm.
literally just a handshake, you know?
And I like how he even says, "Well, if that's what you want to do, you should go." And she's like, "You're not going to try to stop me?" And he's like, "No, because honestly, I'm talking to you as your friend, not your father." And he makes it clear. He's like, "I don't want to be a father figure to you." He's like,
Yeah.
"I want us to be more equals." And I think, you know, you if you really think that's best, do it. Because I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had of like when do we need to kind of put a handicap on these powers? Like we see with Jean, it's like Jean couldn't control it and she ended up paying the price for it, but it's like maybe Rogue just didn't want to become like Jean. And it was
Yeah.
like that was the sacrifice. And although some people would say, well, now if they ever need Rogue, she's not going to be able to be there for them. But then there's that other
Mm.
side that's saying, well, but what was more important to Rogue? And she already saved the day in X-Men. So like it's and X2, she's the one who flies that helicopter. So it's like she's done enough noble stuff where you can kind of say like this one was more for her and like let her be at peace.
Right.
Because sometimes the mutant abilities, as much as Storm says like we gotta like own and love our abilities, and that's the case, they should love themselves for who they are, but at the same time it's
Mhm.
like some of them, just the way they are is almost sometimes detrimental, and it's just about learning how to control that. And some people like Jean couldn't, and Rogue probably just didn't want to take that risk because she did love people so much. And just an interesting conversation. I don't think there's a right or wrong.
Mhm. No, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So I'm giving it a 5 out of 5 or
Yeah.
5 out of 10. Whew.
No, I'm also giving it a 5 out of 10, which means originally had it ranked from not like from worst to best, X-Men The Last Stand X2, but now I think it's The Last Stand X-Men X2 from worst to
Wait,
best.
what was your original one?
I had X-Men last, the first one
Oh,
Last
we had the
Stand
same. Yeah, okay.
X2, and
Yeah, we
now
were on
I
the
think
same
it's
page,
The
and
Last
now
Stand X-Men X2,
yeah,
just
I think
because yeah.
talking it over now, I put X-Men Last Stand. So our rankings are the same. So we don't even have to like for the show, we don't have to determine like what's gonna give and take.
Yeah.
Once we get into the next ones, it'll be interesting because I think as we go along with these movies, we should try to like sandwich the other ones through and see where they would stack with the other ones, not just in their own trilogies. I think
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see if we can compile a ranking. And I think the next episode will give a little bit more of a division. But these ones, I think it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, X2, X-Men Last Stand in last place.
Yeah.
So who is your MVM or MVP and LVM? So the least valuable mutant, most valuable mutant of just this trilogy.
So when you asked me this, Dill, I thought of it in a way of like, if I'm putting together a team of mutants, who would I want on my team?
Right.
And so my MVP, I kind of wrote two, but like I don't really count the second one, and I'll tell you why. So the second one that I don't really count, who I think would just be the most powerful, is Dark Phoenix Jean Grey.
Mm-hmm.
But that's problematic because, she's super unreliable with that strength, and when she's actually using it, it's not her, it's kind of more of an alter ego than anything
Mm-hmm.
else. So my first choice is Magneto.
I have the same one. I have the same
Wait,
one.
really? No
Yeah, I
way.
just think in terms of power, and I do think in terms of because I went more character arc wise, who's the
Yeah.
most valuable mutant or most valuable player in the overall story, and I think Magneto is. I think it's because he has that rooted history with Professor X. Like you said, his motivation is kind of the same the whole way through, but again, his motivation is the same. Like he does have a very clear motivation, and I mean, a lot of the best moments are his moments. His moments are just epic. Like the prison break is just so cool.
Mhm.
That last shot of him moving the chess piece even is like, ooh, Magneto, he's back. And
Yeah.
it's like you don't root for him necessarily, but it's like you get that nice backstory in the first movie with him and in the concentration camp too. Like there's
Yeah.
a lot of good moments of, when everyone's like, you don't have a mark. What are you? Are you not a
Oh,
mutant? And he's like,
yeah.
no, I have a mark and I'm
He was
not
like,
going to
"Oh,
settle
you
for
wanna see
another
my
tattoo.
mark?"
I'm not getting another needle another day, which then ties into the whole vaccine plotline too. And
Yep.
it's like, I think his character arc is just really, really solid. And I haven't seen the prequels, so I'm sure that'll even be fleshed out even more. But
Yeah.
I just love that. And again, if Professor X wasn't taken out halfway through the third one and had a little bit more to do besides just being that thing that they were trying to tap into in the second one, he'd be rivaling it. But I think Magneto
Mhm.
and Professor X are kind of the two heads of the story, and Logan also, but Logan more for popularity's sake. But it's really the two of them are kind of the two heads of the cause, um, opposing causes. And I think Magneto's story arc is just very interesting. And again, yeah, he's just so powerful. He can
Yeah.
literally bend Wolverine because he's filled with metal. Like
Yeah.
there's not much that can take him down except for plastic, and he ends up taking down plastic.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
so
No, yeah.
he's the person I think across all three movies is most consistently enjoyable to watch in all. Like I liked Rogue, but the third one I think they kind of did her a little bit of a disservice, just kind of sending her off in the middle, and she comes back at the end. It's like I didn't love what they did with otherwise Rogue was like my runner up. She was like my
Mm.
Jean Grey, where I'm like I'm close to putting her as my MVP just because I love her arc, but
Mm.
and she's powerful. Obviously, she can kill you by kissing you, but like Magneto and Mystique, and again, Mystique, again, the third movie kind of ruins it for her. So like Magneto, just I think across all three is my favorite. And who was your LVM?
My LVM, I put two. and I might crush you a little bit. And one of them is Rogue. I'm sorry, but in terms of
Power.
me picking a team, like she can only really harm someone if she gets close enough to them where she can touch them in some way,
Mhm.
hold the touch, and then they die. So I'm like,
Right.
that's not safe for you, just like as a mutant, because the closer you get to someone, the more vulnerable you are to just like getting sliced or shot at or
Yeah.
whatever. So you don't want to be
Mhm.
getting close to people in battle.
Yeah. From a strict story, from a strict, sorry, a strength aspect, yeah, I think you're right. Like, it's harder for her to like you can't just like strike someone with your power. It's like no, it's like there's this process. So I get why she's your least valuable in terms of like who you'd want like on your team. But I do think
Yeah.
we can both agree though, like for the terms of the story, she has one of the better arcs in
No,
the whole
yeah. No,
trilogy.
she
Yeah.
does.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like she's one of the very few characters that they really focused their attention on. It was like her,
Hmm.
Logan, I can't even like name another.
Magneto, a little bit. Yeah.
Magneto. Yeah. And then the second one that I wrote that I think is probably even more useless than her is Storm. I'm sorry.
Really? Oh,
I'm just like, you can manipulate the weather, like, fine. Like, that's only good for like what when you can like use lightning to strike someone. But like, we only ever see her do that once.
right.
But like, I don't know. Her power is
Yeah.
just like kind of lame to me.
I get that. And again, I think she's just one of those characters that like we're introduced to her as like she's been here for a while. She's one of the professors, but she doesn't really get to do much. The second one, it's like she's with Jean. Sorry, I keep saying Jane. Jean up in the plane, and like she's going to get Nightcrawler, but it's more about Nightcrawler, and she's just kind of the person getting him. And then X3, it's like she doesn't have much to do there either. She just kind of offers a little advice here and there, but she just
Yeah.
doesn't. And that's not on her. I mean, Halle Berry's great. It's just I just don't think these I didn't want to talk about the directors, but I think a lot of it has to do with the directors didn't really give as much attention to their female characters. And the female characters they gave a lot of attention to were female characters who like were going mad because of their, it was Jean going mad because of her powers, and like Rogue, like having like being the villain almost, like, how dare she touch people? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of issues with that, but I don't want to get into all that, the misogyny and all that shit. But like, and just stuff I've read
Right.
about what they said to Elliot Page on set too. If you have a chance to read, like, it's just not a lot of this actual filmmaking was not great in the way they treated um, some of the cast members. But
Yeah.
I think yeah, Storm is one of those I think that falls under that category of just like they didn't develop her character enough, and
Because
I think she's an interesting character, but yeah.
I think the biggest problem with her is that they introduce us to her and she's already like well adjusted. Like her arc has already been formed almost. And I think the best way they could have given her a little bit of a character arc was at some point, I don't know, I don't remember if it's X2 or the last one. At some point, Professor X says to her, like, hey, you could very well be my successor. Like, you could be running this place one day. So then after he dies, like halfway through, like, it would have been cooler for her to be like struggling with like taking up like the monument of like being the next Professor X per se,
Hmm.
but we didn't really
Yeah.
even get any of that from her
Yeah.
either. And I feel like
And she has a really
that could have
awesome
been there.
moment also in X2. She has that moment where she is the one to snap Charles out of his thing. But again, she
Mhm.
needs Nightcrawler to do it. It's like, and it's not on her, it's just the way they wrote her. It's like she always just needs someone else to kind of, she can never really do it all on her own. And it sucks because I do think, yeah, she's an interesting character, really awesome power, but it's like, yeah, I agree. My LVM, my least valuable mutant, I've been alluding to it all episode. It is Scott.
Yep, I saw this one coming. Yeah.
They just, I mean, I'm going more from a character perspective
Yeah.
than of strength,
No,
but
yeah.
they waste his character. The first movie, he's just there to kind of pick a fight with Logan and give him some sort of other antagonist. Even though these movies have a lot of antagonists as is, it's Magneto, but it's also Stryker, it's also the people, the humans, it's also the parents. Like, there's enough antagonists that like you can't everyone just get along, you know?
Right. Right, right,
And
right.
even in the Rogue, Kitty, Iceman, love triangle, it's not like there's this ill-spirited, back and forth between Kitty and Rogue. There's no like dis dislike. It's just, she's looking at it as from the outside in. Whereas this is all just like it's a little petty. And I love James Marsden, but I don't think he stands out amongst the
Yeah,
rest.
no.
And the second one, he's away for most of it. At the end, he comes back, but then it's like, so what? And the third one, I mean, just forget it. Like they waste his character so much.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
And while I was watching it, I realized, like, it must suck, like, as an actor to, like, not even be able to use your eyes for, like, screen acting. Like, just from the acting perspective, like, real
Yeah.
quick, we only see him with the glasses for the first 2 movies, and when he's not wearing them, he has to keep his eyes closed or else the laser will come shooting out of him. But and we only ever get to see his eyes for, like, a split second in the last his last moments in the last film when Jean's like,
Hmm.
"No, no, open them. Like, I'll be able to control your powers," kind of thing. And that's the only time like we get to see his eyes, and I'm like, man, this role must suck. You can't even like convey anything with your eyes. The most
Yeah,
important, the
it
windows to
sucks.
the soul, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was just a wasted character opportunity. I almost said Mystique, but she's so cool in those first 2 movies that
Hmm.
that 3rd movie, it ruins her character, but I don't think it's her fault, and I still like her as a character. Like, she's still a highlight of this trilogy for me.
Hmm.
But Scott, I just feel like every movie dropped the ball on him. I just
Yeah,
think that.
100%.
Um,
I agree.
yeah. So those are the X-Men original trilogy. I mean, that is the X-Men original trilogy, not those plurals. Um, yeah. So overall, you know, generally middle of the road for both of us. You know, six,
Hmm.
5, 6, 7 out of tens, like a pretty positive, but also like a little mixed. And I think that's kind of what the audience perspective was too. I think a lot of people loved the first one because it was the first time we saw these characters on screen, and if you're a comic book fan, of course, deservedly so. The second one, a lot of people love, still love. They rank it in their top 3 or 4 X-Men movies, and fairly so. And then the third one, a lot of people didn't like. It was very mixed for the reasons we said. It's just too rushed. Some plot lines make no sense. Two cold opens.
Two
um,
cold opens.
and I love Angel. I think he's a cool character. I love the wings and everything, but it's like,
I like how he doesn't take the vaccine. He's like, "No, I can't do
mhm,
this." Because the whole time you think like, "Oh, then he's gonna be the first person in line." He's been trying to pluck out his feathers since youth, but he ends up not taking it, and then he saves his dad, so it's like he kinda gets this nice little mini arc, but
mhm,
then we just, like, never hear about that kid
yeah.
anymore.
And again, it's a nice parallel to real life where it's like if a kid, again, I'm going to compare it to coming out. Like if a kid is coming out to his father, what does that feel like? And if his father, if he's scared to come out to his father, he tries his best to like, not be that way. But then at the end, it's like, no, I am that, and that's what he's accepting. And I
Mm.
like those parallels. And I wish the third movie did more of that. The first movie did more of that. That's why the second one I think is so good. So next time we are talking about the X-Men Beginnings trilogy. And we're going to say trilogy because Dark Phoenix, we are counting toward our last episode where we're going to talk about the 2 movies that were the end of Fox era. So we're not going to
Mm.
talk about Dark Phoenix, but we are going to talk about X-Men First Class from 2011, X-Men Days of Future Past from 2014, and X-Men Apocalypse from 2016. It'll be an interesting discussion because I have not seen any of these. Kelsey has, and she'll be rewatching. And we know
Yep.
if you follow her on TikTok, you know she loves some James McAvoy. So,
I just love him.
any
So
preview thoughts before we jump into that next week?
I like the prequels, I think, better than the trilogy we just watched, just because I think I know the actors more.
Mhm.
I like watching the relationship between Professor X and Magneto kind of like flourish into what it like later
Yeah.
becomes. Um and I actually like I remember walking away from Apocalypse and remember like really liking it. That could very well change by next week.
Yeah.
But because I think that's the one that a lot of people like don't really like. But I remember
Mhm.
like walking away and being like, I thought that was like a solid like superhero
Yeah.
movie. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh
It'll be interesting now
we'll
seeing
see.
also, like, seeing their relationships now, especially with Professor X and Magneto, seeing now when they go back, what it's like, how it started. One thing we didn't talk about really quick was that post-credit scene. What do you feel about that?
Oh, when we find out that Charles is
Yeah.
alive? Dumb, because there's no 4th X-Men movie, so I'm like, "What are you setting us up for?" I don't
Yeah.
get it.
And, like,
Uh,
Logan, I feel like Logan is one of those things
and
where, like,
also, how did he
you could still
survive
have.
getting dusted? I'm sorry, I needed to talk over you, like, he just he bursted, like, all of his
Right.
molecules just went so
Right,
it's like
it's not like a dead corpse that like a Vision where you can try to reanimate it. It's not.
yeah, it, like, looked like they had his body somehow in, like, a hospital bed. I'm like, "Where did they get this body? The body is dust."
Right. Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway, next week, X-Men Beginnings, and then just to schedule ahead of time, if you're watching along with us and you don't have time to watch 3 movies a week and really get a head start, after that we will be talking about the Wolverine Trilogy, which is X-Men Origins Wolverine with the Wolverine and Logan, our personal favorite. I don't know if it'll change, but the next week we'll be talking about Deadpool, Deadpool and Deadpool 2, and then the week after we'll be talking about the 2 end of Fox era films, Dark Phoenix and the New Mutants. And then the week after, we'll be talking about Loki, which we forgot to mention at the top of the show, is now coming out on Wednesdays, on June 7th? 9th. So close. June 9th, we'll be getting the first episode of Loki. So we will time it out perfectly. So our X-Men chat will end on Monday. You'll get Loki on Wednesday. And then we'll be talking about Loki a few days later. It'll give us more time to talk about it. You'll be hearing about Loki a lot later than it's premiering now, but it gives us more time to kind of soak it in too. So I don't know how I feel about the change, but we'll see. We'll see on Thursday morning or Wednesday morning after staying up till 3 a.m. how I feel. So
make sure you text me if there's an end credit scene.
Yes, but we will get there in 4 weeks now. So that was X-Men, our MVMs, Magneto, between the two of us, and our LVMs. You said Rogue, Storm, and Scott is mine. So that was it. And Kelsey, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Kelsey A. Kilpatrick. You can find me on TikTok if you want to hear about my obsession about James McAvoy, Cause13, or you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, KOZ Productions.
It's a great channel. Go check it out. You can find me at Dylan_Randazzo at Twitter, at Dylan Randazzo 417 on TikTok, and at the Dill Pickle Movie Network. My voice is a little hoarse just because I've been talking about movies so much the past few weeks, and I can't wait to talk about more movies and more shows and all that jazz. Upcoming, we have this show every single Monday. We have the Great American Film Off twice a month, every first and third Friday of the month. We just talked about mafia movies. It was a lot of fun. That aired last Friday. We also have Frame Wreck every month, which is a show about bad movies that are so bad they're good. And then Picture This, where we go into a year of Oscar history and dissect every single Best Picture nominee of that year. And just want to wish all the mothers out there Happy Mother's Day. It was yesterday, but we wish everyone a Happy Mother's Day. Kelsey, Happy Mother's Day to your mother, to all the women in your family. Not you.
But you were saying to me, because last Mother's Day, someone like at the restaurant was like, Happy Mother's Day. And I was like, I am not, huh?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not the first time someone has wished me a Happy Mother's Day.
So we're wishing Happy Mother's Day to Ramonda, to Frigga, to all those beautiful mothers out there. I'm blanking on all the rest. Janet Van Dyne. Yeah.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke.
And Wanda herself. So everyone have a very happy Mother's Day, or I hope you had a very happy Mother's Day yesterday. If you know, you're not listening to us when we filmed it, so it already happened, but happy Mother's Day. We'll see you next week for the X-Men Beginnings.